Okay, so we're going to be talking about space planning for the next, I think we have an hour, right? The session's an hour long. I'm going to go for 45 or so, or less than that, and get some interaction from you, and I'm going to find out a little bit about you. But first, let's talk a little bit about me and the organization. I'm from Shen, Milsom & Wilkie, and we are a pure consulting firm. We are the fiduciary in the industry. We do not sell product. We guide our clients. Clients are either end users or they're architects, and we're part of a team as an architect coming into a project doing design services on their behalf. So our effectiveness is to guide the individual or the project team, and that makes us sort of this neutral player in the industry. And we're worldwide. So we have got offices around the world, including right here in the Denver office, and also all the way to Hong Kong and in London as well. So we have a wide distribution, and that's important because across the world, we can see trends and compare what's happening in the different areas of the world. We're also a multidisciplinary company, and this is also important. We cut our teeth in acoustics, but we also do IT and physical security, and as you probably know, innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum, and a lot of the stuff that's happening in the IT, it crosses over with AV, and also with security as well. So our peers that are working right next to us are in those industries, and we share knowledge, we share training, we share awareness of trends, and our clients are hiring us not just for one service, but for multiple services as they need them. So we're going to talk a little bit about hybrid work and digital and physical mobility. I'm not going to talk to you today about unique particular products and what you're going to see at the show, okay? This isn't a show forward session. This is more a visionary session, more strategic session, and I'm going to give you concepts that hopefully you can carry with you. And I want to get into the AI in meeting spaces because I think it's extremely impactful in a way that I don't believe other people are really looking at closely. So the elements of how you plan spaces will be discussed in the time frame that we have, so we can't get into a lot of detail. But I know we had a couple of people looking at hybrid mobility and how to fit hybrid mobility in. So we're definitely going to be talking about that topic, and we're going to talk about AI and how to apply AI into the spaces. So before we get further, let's see who we have in the office and what are you looking to get out of the session?
Learn how I have to interact with architects and to be able to plan our projects.
Interact with architects and how to plan your projects. You, sir?
Yeah, very similar.
And how about you?
Yeah, I'm just going to better understand trends and where we kind of aim for.
What's your role?
My role, I'm a business owner.
A business owner, and your role?
Consultant.
Consultant as well. And in the back?
Yes, we're an IT integrator that's new to the space.
IT integrator, use this space. And where are you located?
In Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City. Okay, great. Good. So the first thing I want to talk to you about, this slide, I'm going to give you a bunch of these sort of scaffolding slides to lead you into the conversation. We all remember the chaos before the hybrid, before we all went hybrid and went into the pandemic. There was this scenario where we were in this flexible seating strategy and going, this is insanity, right? Why are we all in these odd spots? So we need to back into this and understand what the principles, guiding principles that were going on in space planning, because it was very intentional. The first thing we were seeing were the private offices and the cubicles going into the open plans, right? Bringing down the walls. Why do you think they were doing that? What was the point? The point was team building. Because if you're in a cubicle or if in an office, then you're doing heads down work by yourself. If we can break down those walls and create an open plan, you're seeing what your peers are doing, you can hear your peers, and you can work more effectively as a team. The other thing that started happening was we went from assigned seating to flexible seating. The point of that was to create this creativity and innovation. Why? Because if you are going from an assigned seat to flexible seating, the assumption is you're sitting by people that you don't know. Your peers that may be in a different part of the company doing different activities. In some companies, the owners of the companies are actually sitting in a flexible desk as well, right? So these are called collisions. This cross-pollination and silo-busting capabilities by putting people in a sort of disparate arrangement of seat plans. works well in a physical model if you understand the intention. I don't think they ever explained to the people that were sitting in these spaces what they were going through and why they had to have lockers and why they had to keep their desk clean. But the purpose was to create open-mindedness. Okay, let's apply this to the virtual environment, right? Because when you're home, when you're sitting at your desk or at home, you are in your private office, right? You have very little interactions with other people because you're sitting at the end of a Zoom call. So the goal was get you into the office, right? Get you into the office to try to see you, engage with you, to create more of this team building. What happens also with Microsoft Teams versus Zoom? Microsoft Teams is designed around channels. How many of you use Microsoft Teams? Right, so you've got these channels of conversations. It's Teams in the name. So if you want to create pencils and you want to be really efficient at making pencils, you will dive in and strategize on Teams and leverage that process because you'll productionize pencils. But you'll never get to the next iteration of a pen or anything outside of your arena because you aren't encountering anybody else but what you're meeting with, the people that you meet with in your team group. Compare that to Zoom. In many cases, Zoom was the same tool that was used for calling home, for calling your neighborhood, for getting into completely different group sessions than your organization. In fact, many times we see people using both platforms. Zoom tend to be more open and easier to use and more flexible to use when you have different groups. So organizations that have multiple disciplines, multiple groups come together, typically are leaning into Zoom versus Teams until about a year ago. And then we saw a lot more of the licensing and a lot easier use of Teams and joining teams. So that was being used for sessions and having real-time conversations, even though the structure of that tool was really designed around internal processing, okay? Next thing we need to look at is the planning of the facility versus the technology life cycle. And what's happening here is you're working with your client, and your client says, I'm going to build a new building. We've got enough money to do that, and we're going to plan it out. It's going to be 2 years from now, right? Or whatever, 2 years for a building. This is not a renovation of existing space, but it could be an existing space renovation in place, right? So the technology that they have been putting out into the field is getting old, and they want to refresh it. Well, hang on, we're going to build a new building. We're not going to put new gear into an old building. We're going to try to time this to be part of this new facility. Okay, well, wait a second. If your technology life cycle is I'm going to take new technology, I've got to implement that technology, support the technology, and run and maintain that technology. And if you say, well, we're going to wait and put new technology when we build in the new building, that better be able to be supported, run, and maintained by the time you get occupancy. Otherwise, you have product that could be the very best technology. No one knows how to use it. No one's been trained, and no one knows how to support that. Is that happening? Are you seeing that? Strategy here is when you start to engage with a client, the key elements that they're going to be dependencies on by the client. It's sitting on their network. It has a user interface. It's the UC engine. You want to push in early on and identify those products and say, you need to look at these products. We need to seed those products into your support teams, and you need to be familiar and ready to maintain them so that by the time we come to specification, we're specifying products and you're aware of what that experience is like. This is when you talk about one button to push, right? I just want one button to push into a meeting. Well, in order to have that happen, that product has to have a registry. It has to be in a resource on your campus. Do you have a team that supports Microsoft Teams deployment? Can they also support rooms that are built on Teams? Or is your IT model where you're outsourcing all of your IT services to another group? Who is going to take care of these rooms and support these rooms in this new platform? So the more experience they have, the more awareness they are, they're ready to time this, okay? The other thing we want to look at is the fact that all of the technology that's happening in this space is interconnected. Many of the bids processes that we see, the architect or the client says, I just want to upgrade a couple of rooms, right? I'm not doing the whole campus. I just got a multimedia room over here, or a large conferencing room. I'm just going to upgrade those. But they can't be done in a vacuum because each of these areas are used to the best effectiveness of the organization. For example, the arrival space. Some companies are focused on their client experience. Their model, like a financial firm, a private equity firm, is all around making sure that investor, that client, comes up the elevator, comes into the space, is given the best experience, is sold on the services, and walks out there with a satisfied experience. So you need to be able to look at that. One of the ways we do this is a process of mapping out the client experience, right? So you use this client mapping strategy of being able to mark out what's the arrival like, who meets the client when they arrive, what software are they using for client booking, what information do they get, and then how is the host recognized when they come up the elevator to meet them, and how do they get into the meeting room, who sets up the room. So this is called a journey map. So we want to look at journey mapping, and we also want to look at personas. The role that an individual plays. Are they sitting in the residential neighborhood, which means that they're there all the time and they have the best gear? Are they a nomad, like a salesperson who only comes occasionally? And what's the experience like for each of these different types of personas? And we use journey mapping to recognize what are the dependencies to have that experience to be most effective. Make sense? So we've got this combination of both physical and digital mobility. I'm moving people around the spaces, but I also know that they're most effective when they're at their desk. They have the best equipment there. So as they bring their technology into the spaces, I need to consider how effective they're going to be into those meeting rooms. I also want to understand their sense of community. This is particularly important when we're talking about digital signage and content that we're displaying on screens, and how to brand aware their content. The community may be an association with their office and their office space with the other people that are in that space. It may be that there's a large open area where they share vendors. Vendors come in and they have a message around equity and socialization and sustainability, and they want to identify their brand with the community, okay? And it may be very important for them to do. Or they may have an internal community where they really want to reinforce what's happening in the coffee desk and conversational language and dynamics of the organization, like Etsy and others. They really want to build this sort of socialization model. Or they may have a digital community. They may have an intranet, and that intranet and branding and message and signing is really important, particularly if they've got a lot of hybrid workers that are moving back and forth. Their ability to feel an identity with the community is happening on the digital side as opposed to happening at the physical side. So we want to understand what their community requirements are and how to reinforce that brand awareness as you build out the spaces. And you also want to look at how the different types of modes of work and the different settings intersect. For example, when I'm working alone, we call this deep work. This is work that's outside. This is process performance work. Most of our meetings that we're having on Teams is all about efficiency, and it's telling people an update. Here's where I am. Where's our report? Here's the status of the report. Here's the status of the information that you asked for last time. A lot of that we would call light work. And light work may be happening much more in these virtual sessions with our teams as opposed to deep and heavier work where we're much more heads down. And we need to design and make sure our spaces and our technology is applicable for both of those types of spaces. We'll get to that in just a minute. Asynchronous and synchronous collaboration. Do you guys understand the importance of these two? I'm going to go into this for just a second. So, as we're talking about with deep work, that deep work is asynchronous. I may be working with a team on a document, but I grab that document at a different time than you do. So we're not in the same room talking and discussing. I'm pulling that document. Many times teams, and these are just pictures of that to get a sense of that, you're on a channel and you're sharing a document. Now you could be collaborating at the same time in that document, but it's asynchronously because I'm changing text and you're changing text at the same time. Asynchronous collaboration and synchronous collaboration are happening at the same time with meetings. So when I go through this process and I've done my report, I'm going to come in, I'm going to share that session with you, and we're going to talk about where we reached, what goals were achieved, and get feedback and share my journey. This is why Teams is very successful, because I'm able to do both of those collaboration methods within the same tool. I'm not having to jump out of my tool to have have either a live session and have this sort of document storing and sharing and processing. So when I'm looking at my technology that I'm putting into place, I need to consider the importance of both of those types of skill sets, because they're both important and the tools need to support both of those. The next thing I look at is the hierarchy of needs. When I talk about hierarchy of needs, this is sort of this, you can't get to the next level until you achieve the first level. And so, for example, before the pandemic, we had a real problem finding rooms, right? Room booking was a real issue. You only had a limited amount of spaces, you had more people that needed to use the rooms, and you had to have room reservation tools in order to be able to find the room, book the room, hold the room, and release the room if you didn't show up. And post-pandemic, that's changed, right? The requirement now is where's my peers? Are they in the office at the same time? I probably got a lot of different rooms that are available, but I want to be able to meet with you in the room at the same time. So the first thing, before I even look at the technology that's in the room, is I want to make sure that it's easy to get into the rooms and to book the rooms, which typically means I need to use Outlook, I need to use a plugin, I need to use a booking tool, and that's why the platforms, both Zoom and Teams, have come around to making it very easy to incorporate those resources into the calendar. So in theory, if I book the room and invite the room, I can go in the room and do a one-button push. In order to do that, I need to have back-end infrastructure and technology people creating these resource accounts. If they don't do that, I can't get into the room to use the technology, okay? So I can buy a video bar from Poly, go and stick that into a room, and they can come in and they won't be able to book the room because no one has integrated the room resource account associated with that technology, okay? So I got a working room. Now I want to be able to share people and content. So I have to have a logic to the system and how the system's supposed to work in terms of sharing content, and we're now at the platform level. So where previously people and content would have been driven by a customized code structure that's unique that you go to programming for Crestron or somebody to do, now it's very much a part of the application level, and everybody's expected consistency is happening because uniformity, because I'm able to use the Zoom or native Zoom or Teams, walk into the room, and I know the same sharing is going to happen regardless of the room size that I'm using. But I want to be able to have a consistent people sharing experience. And if I have all of those working, I've got a reliable room, I can book it, I can get in there and I can share content and get into my calls, now I can create some sort of uniformity and consistency. In other words, a lot of times what's happening at the beginning of this is, I got rooms that don't work. I get into them and I can't figure them out. I can't bother, I need a technician to come and help me because it's just too complicated to be able to use. So I can't get to the form of standardizing room types and say this is a small huddle room, this is a medium, this is a large room or a type room or a type 2. I can't get to that unless I have some sort of consistency and reliability. So when you're seeing that, opportunity is to create standards, create models, create shell structure that gives you the ability to stack the capabilities as the rooms get larger in the space. Meanwhile, on the web conferencing side of this, I've got a very similar challenge. I've got to find the meeting invite, which should be in my Outlook meeting. I've got to have a link. I've got to be able to click and join that call. And that needs to be consistent. I need to be able to do that reliably. And I need to get to the point where I can interop, I can share and get into calls, whether they're Cisco or WebEx or a Cisco WebEx or Teams or Zoom. And at the top of both of these is a sense of equity. And this is where we get into that parity of whether I'm in the room or out of the room. And in the room, equity in this case means that regardless of my language, regardless of my skin tone, I'm going to have the same experience as everybody else. It's an important consideration. If you get to this point of being able to have consistent experience, you want to make sure everybody's having the same level of contribution and capabilities regardless of their ethnicity, gender, or anything like that. And in this case, the equity is the parity. I can be seen and be heard whether I'm remote or whether I'm in the room at the same time. So in the hybrid space, you're dealing with both of these. You're flip-flopping back and forth. You're coming into the office, you need to be able to book the rooms, and you need to be able to find that meeting invite. So you're landing in the middle of those spaces there. So when I'm looking at this hierarchy of needs, this is a structure where you can start to identify what are the challenges the user's having in those spaces. what are the problems they're currently encountering? Does it fit into one of these categories? Are there other factors that need to be considered that are dependent in order to be able to get to success? And the main message here is consistency. Yes, sir?
On the previous slide, at the top of the pyramid, the equity there, so how do you, what's your recommendation for applying that to space planning?
Yes. So in an equity situation, a couple things there. On the design of the spaces, I don't want to have white walls, full of white walls, because if I have dark colored skin, I'm going to look in shadow. Or if I'm using microphones, I want to make sure my audio is heard regardless of my language barriers, right? I want to be able to perform at the same level whether I'm in India or whether I'm in the United States. So the equity of the design of the spaces happens because I've mastered all of those other capabilities. But that doesn't answer your question. Say your question again. Okay. So that's the concept of equity there. The other thing when you want to look at equity, we're going to talk about in a minute, parity between being remote, hybrid, and being in the space. We're going to get into details of how to solve that one. First thing is consistency. So whether I'm at the desk or in the huddle room, in the conference room, I need a consistent experience. Fortunately, we've got platforms to be able to do that. Fortunately, we have USB-C now, right, which is instead of HDMI. So what type of tool we're going to be used to be plugging in and making sure that I can be as impactful and capable when I'm at my desk. When I get into a room, I don't lose my power and my capabilities. So now we're going to shift and talk a little bit about AI in meeting place designs. And the things we need to consider here is this convergence of the in-person and the remote and the machine interaction. So in this hybrid space, we've got remote people and people in the room. We also have the data. We have information we want to be able to share. And the digital information is spatial. Most of the time when we're doing in-person meetings and we're doing PowerPoint slides or a spreadsheet, it's limited to the structure of the frame of the screen in front of you. But now there's a lot more data than you could possibly put on any screen at any given time, okay? So you need to consider how you're going to deal with the content being greater than the real estate of any screen. And we'll get into that in a minute. And also we need to be able to integrate the walls and furniture. This is a very big trend happening at the architectural level. They're treating screen surfaces as a part of the architectural finish. It's set and recessed and looks consistent and not an afterthought. And it's important for the architect, important for the people using the space, that the displays aren't just thrown onto the wall, but there's this ability to complete the feeling of space by aligning the barriers and boundaries of the screen surface and hiding the microphones and not making them feel like they're out in the middle and making it the tech obvious, because we want to make the experience feel seamless, okay? So the first thing in the AI area that we saw happening is the AI for camera tracking, right? This is a big popular thing, and we've got a couple of brands like Sony that have been very good at this. Sear Vision, before it was acquired by QSC, was also doing this quite a bit. They're looking at the frame of the individual, and as they move around, they don't need an operator to be able to track them, okay? And this has definitely become productionized. Everyone can be able to do this. And the other thing to keep in mind is no one's feeling their information is that they're at risk, right? I'm not transmitting any information, so therefore my identity is safe. My body is just being tracked by the cameras, and I don't have to have an operator. And this is very important for multi-purpose spaces and presentation spaces, is to reduce the dependency on an operator by putting intelligence into the camera system. The other thing we're having is camera framing, where I'm able to take that 4K sensor and carve it up so that only certain parts of the image are used, and I can stitch them together to create the closer up images. So that's this parity side. So am I watching what's happening in the room? I get a better sense of the reactions of the people in the room, and I maintain some consistency of awareness, situational awareness of what everyone is and what they're doing in the space. And this is happening in the software, software that's built into the cameras. We also have multiple cameras. In this case, this is the Hudley system. And this camera system has 3 cameras built in. The 2 on the side are designed slightly higher to over the top of the individual so that when you're having tables that are these long boardroom style tables, bowling alley tables, you get obstructed view of the screen and you get obstructed view of the camera, and these cameras are coming over the top to be able to see people more effectively, and the processing of which camera to show to the far end is happening in the camera itself as opposed to at the platform, which we'll get to in a second. This kind of technology is very successful at if you don't have to, if you're not upgrading the facility itself and you want to upgrade the room as opposed to start from scratch. You want to create more hybrid interaction and capabilities without having to rip and replace the entire room out. The cameras themselves are not that expensive to be able to do. The other thing that's happening is the cameras are being positioned in the middle of the table, right? This is, Poly is doing this, Logitech is doing, Logitech Site, that's an example of that. Camera in the middle, so as people look to each other, the people at the far end are getting that image of that interaction, and when they look at the screen, the camera is picked up at the front of the room, and that's where the most important part is happening, is there's a decision being made at the process in the hardware saying instead of looking here, I see you're looking at the camera at the front, so I'm going to take that image of you at the front of the room rather than the other camera. So there's decision making happening in the cameras to choose the best image to take of the person. And that's why we're calling this AI, because it's not just tracking people, but it's making a logical decision based upon the images in the camera. And we have intelligent camera switching. It's also called automatic preset recall. This is very much where we are right now in the industry, is utilizing ceiling microphones and beam arrays and associating them with the camera preset. QSC is doing this with Sennheiser and other manufacturers, and I can use this very well in a multi-purpose room where I don't have a defined camera locations. Everyone's not sitting in the same place. I want to be able to use the presets where people are talking and recall the camera. It's not very accurate, and it's technically, I would not call this AI. It's just using the logic between the camera and the microphone to work. But it is successful and an inexpensive way to reduce the amount of operational requirements and improve the hybrid experience. And of course, we have at the platform level, like Zoom and Teams as well, starting to roll this out, I'm able to take those camera images and stitch them together at the platform. So a lot more of the work is happening at the platform, at Zoom or at Teams, and all of these technologies are becoming just windshield wipers on the bus being Zoom or Teams, right? And as long as I can get the processing happening up at the cloud level, I'm good, okay? For this level of intelligence and switching. Now let's put this into application. Here is an example of a room. This is a multi-purpose room. We've got a bowling alley table. And let's look, we've got a couple things going on. You can see the cameras are positioned down the sides as opposed to down at the front end of the room. And we see that there's a very important level of architectural cleanliness here, right? Clean lines as if the technology is built in seamless experience. The monitors on the window side come down, motorized, come down off of lifts, and the cameras are positioned just at the right height over the top of people to see across. And if you're sitting at a far end of this experience, you are able to feel you're part of the conversation because you're able to be seen and heard. And in this case, they have two cameras stacked up opposite the primary seat, which is not at the end of the table, but it's at the center of the table, and that's why you see the two monitors here. So the individuals that are sitting opposite those cameras are really the prime seat in this location. But the design of the space is also multi-purpose. So if I take the room apart, I can separate it with dividers, and each one of those can have the same automatic camera preset recall happening and motorized retraction. Notice no cables at the table, right? The reason that's happening is some of these companies have gotten to the point where they're able to do all of their sharing within the platform. So if they're bringing their laptops in and they're doing it through Zoom, they're sharing through Zoom, they don't need an HDMI cable at the table. The only thing they need is power at the table, right, in order to be able to run it. And there needs to be a touch panel, which is missing from this image, of the actual, you can see it in the middle of the table, there's the one at the far end, to be able to call up and recall the event. But they don't need any sort of HDMI cables in order to share into the session. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, AI productivity tools. So we're seeing a bunch of these tools come in to improve productivity. We've got, well, the avatars I don't think of as being productivity, but I bring that just to show you kind of what the AI concept is happening. But live translation, right? Live translation is a really important capability. And this is getting better in the last year and 2 years. It's not perfect because you're not seeing body language, you're just hearing the voices, but you're much more effective live translation. And then rewind, catch up. So you can join calls now, and you could be late to the session, and you can get a recap of what's happened in the meeting, provided the meeting is recorded. If the meeting is not recorded, the ability to catch up is not there, right? So somebody who's had to start that recording in order to make that capable. So if it's in the company or outside of the company, that may or may not be a viable option. And then you get notes and sharing notes. Also needs to be done. Transcriptions need to be active in order for you to be able to take advantage of that. So the AI concepts here are all around productivity. They're all around efficiency. They're not around creativity. And if you remember at the beginning, we talked about two dynamics. If my company is very good at being productive and they can work really well together, then I might want to, instead of focusing on that, I may want to increase their potential for being creative and thinking outside the box. If they're super creative, but they're disorganized and they're not getting things done effectively, I want to make more opportunities to create consistency and more efficiency and productivity within my teams, okay? So these kinds of products do a very good job at creating efficiency and productivity, but they don't talk to creativity, spontaneity, and thinking outside the box, okay? ChatGPT, in this case, it's Microsoft Copilot branded ChatGPT. You guys are familiar with Copilot, right? Okay. This came out of the market, and we had some companies that they would buy 4,000 or 5,000 licenses all at once. They go out there and say, you know, this product doesn't do any good. I'm not finding any value. And they're right, because they're spending $30, $40 a month for users. They got no training. They didn't understand how to manage expectations. They didn't know what to expect. They were just given this ability to type in a prompt. And then on the Microsoft side, very limited capabilities. You may be able to start a Word document and get a structure for a Word document. You may be able to summarize a document or PowerPoint, but really very little value above and beyond what you could do on your own. Versus ChatGPT Direct 4.0 is the most recent release. You're able to get a lot of information by using wordsmithing and plugging in documents in there. But the key here, a couple key things happening. Copilot is small font, right? When I'm typing into these boxes, this is a very small amount of information, small text information. Fine when I'm at my desk, but if I'm in a meeting room, I'm going to have difficulty seeing this kind of content, right? So if I'm at my desk and I type in March sales report and I see some information, I say, you know what, that March sales report, here are the figures, and I come into a meeting, the next thing you know is, well, Mark, what about this? Did you look at this when you did the sales report? I go, well, no, I didn't. Now I could go back to my desk and figure this and have a journey back in with Copilot again and then come back to you next week? No, you want to have a session right there with whoever your peers are and say, what are the questions could I have asked that I didn't ask to get the right report? We're all on the same team, right? This brings us to the next level of AI. So you're probably aware of just in a couple of weeks ago, 4.0 releases the ability to do conversational speech conversation, real-time speech conversation. A couple of months ago, this was in the news because Scarlett O'Hara's voice was being used by OpenAI, and her voice was able to talk and hear you and have inflections in speech. In other words, she would breathe. She would take breaths as she spoke as if it was completely human. Shut your eyes and you would not be able to tell the difference. We are at the point where instead of just typing in text into a box, where you would do that if you had small amount of information, now comes into voice, and it's happening at the same time we're about to reach the next level, which is reasoning. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to take you now on a concept. So if we can make this assumption leap that you are going to be wanting to have a conversation with AI because that large language model has information you need to get to, we need to share that information together. So instead of just typing it in, if I type it in, you have a question, you need to be able to type it in, or you need to be able to ask a question dynamically. These conversations are within milliseconds. If you look back at what was happening in Alexa, How many of you tried to put Alexa into meeting room spaces? There was a big push for that, right? And it was a problem. It was a problem because you had to have an AWS account. You may have had a product like a Logitech Tap, and it was a lot of back-end infrastructure to try to make it work. And the whole end of the thing was to launch a meeting. This isn't about launching meetings. This isn't at all about the meetings. This is about mining the data that your organization has in its capabilities. This is about processes, steps, procedures, access to data. So if I'm a large firm, I am looking to understand about how I work, how I can work more efficiently by providing this pool of data and comparing to what's happening in the industry. And so we're going to explore this a little further. The levels of AI intelligence will help us to understand where we are here. Just finished level 1. I can do chatbots, and I've got these conversational language, really good conversational language. You don't even have yet to see what's going to happen. In a couple months, Apple Intelligence is going to have that on your phone. How many times have we seen consumerization of products come into corporate, right? During the pandemic, we didn't have that because a lot of people were not in a situation we didn't have products out there. Now we're back to a spot where we're going to see more commoditization, consumer products coming into the corporate market. And conversational language is going to be happening on your Apple phone, and you can bet if I can do really good job with AI on my phone, and I can work with it on a phone, you remember the conversation? If I can do it on my phone, how come I can't do it at work, right? It's going to drive the executives going, I have an easier time using my phone to get into these experiences than I can in a meeting room. So we need to be ahead of this. If we're looking at where we are now, and this is happening so rapidly, we're going to miss the duck, right? We need to aim for the duck further out so that we're ready to provide the services, but we have nothing to level. There's nobody doing this. There's no other company that's actually using this today, so I have no ability to say, oh, company A down the road is using AI and using conversation, so I'll do what they do. And by the time that happens, they're going to have been missing the advancements. So if it's a company needs to look ahead. And I would say, what is the infrastructure I need to support conversational language? Are my rooms able to do that? And I bet you they are. We're going to look at that in a minute. And the next level is human reasoning and problem solving. So the capability to answer questions and solve problems is only level 2. The next thing that's going to happen are agents. And even if this never happens, even if 40 or 50% of this happens, you're better off anticipating these functionalities and capabilities, because the worst thing that happens is you may have over-created infrastructure. If you don't think these are going to happen and you dismiss them, then you're very much likely to miss an opportunity, and your companies are going to miss an opportunity. They're spending billions of dollars to create the technology, and your companies are going to be investing in this, particularly in marketing and other services. Here's another way of looking at that scaffolding. Chatbot capability, ability to understand visual inputs, ability to hear and have speech recognition. Then here's understanding context, and we're right at this level. If you look at what's happening 4.0, that's at the green, and then at 4, this is 5.0. And OpenAI has just announced 5.0. And at the same time, we're hearing the speech recognition. If you look at the news with 6 days ago, Amazon Alexa has just invested in Anthropic. And Anthropic has their own Claude AI. So they are doubling down on Alexa, right? Because Alexa was not effective in selling products to their spaces. Now, it may not be the right decision, but the point is, everybody is recognizing speech recognition is definitely going to be an important characteristic in how we do our work. And that's because the understanding and concepts and advanced reasoning are all going to be built upon those base layers. So when we look at conversations in the spaces, in the meeting spaces, at a point where the technology and the platforms aren't ready to take them on, I predict that you need to bring your own intelligence. You are not going to be able to have spaces that have that ability to have the resources, intelligent resources, that are built into the company, because this is happening too fast. So you need to be able to have, on your laptop, I have a chat session. I'm going to bring my chat session in, and I'm going to share it with you, right? I need to bring my own experience and my own process that I've come up with my AI bot, and I need to share it into the session, and I need to be able to have a conversation with it. We're also going to have information as a resource. So the company is going to subscribe, like a room resource. It's going to have its own model, and it's going to give you certain levels. Your executives, they're going to have access to all of the information that they've ring-fenced, and it's their strategy and their models. And then they're going to give other people at different levels limited access to those resources. And you're going to have account-based access to the resources. And then you got to think about what happens when these all combine. What happens when you bring your own intelligence and I bring my own intelligence? And what are we going to do in this meeting room with our different versions of our sessions and combine that? So this is a messed up space, and it will be for a while. So we need to, very similar, is to look at how we integrate this technology. Now, let's step back and understand, is this real? How much of this is actually going to be practical? And there is this technology adoption strategy. This was, if you listen to National Public Radio and Freakonomics, I'm not sure if you guys know those programs. There's a couple of programs that look at methodologies for firms and enterprises and how they adopt different technologies and strategies. And one of these was RHIP. So the example they used was surgeons in surgery will carry beepers, right? Tons of beepers. You know what I'm talking about? You saw that one? You heard that one, right? And then they were trying to use text-based. And so the people that were trying to get a hold of the surgeons said, why don't we adopt text messaging? Because we use text messaging and everything else. And they loved it. And they could attach images to the text messages. They said, this is great. We can give all this information to the surgeon, and the surgeon will be able to respond and tell us whether it's a priority or not and what to do. And the surgeon said, no, not so fast. We're not comfortable with what's going on. We're losing power. We're giving the ability to reach us is much more than our ability to respond. So we're overwhelmed with questions and queries, and we're not able to control and govern this interaction. And that's why we need to look at each level of these adoption key points. So risk. One of the risks we have with Alexa was, can someone hear my voice, right? Can someone hear my conversation when I don't mean to be speaking to it? Can it listen in? So when Alexa works with Anthropic to go to their next level of engagement, are they going to solve for that? Are you personally feel comfortable with risk? And as we talked about, if I'm doing camera tracking in a room, not much risk, right? Frame me all you want. I don't think that's going to be a problem. But if you're listening to my conversation, that's a problem, right? The data security and ring fencing and ethical risks need to be considered. So conversations are going to have a real challenge there, right? Because it's like, could be listening. I may need to do a button to push it and push to talk and not talk. So I'm only allowing the conversations to occur when I'm intentionally making them occur. Reduce the risk. Habits. Am I comfortable talking to a device? Is this something I do on a day-to-day basis? No. But if I'm doing this on my phone, trying to reach my phone to show you, but if Apple is doing two things, Apple's AI is already dealing with the risks. They're saying, we're going to really make this secure. It's only happening at your device, and we're going to protect your data. And OpenAI is not doing that, or neither is Google, but we're going to do that. So we're going to reduce the risk, and we're going to make the experience so habitual. I'm going to be talking much more to my device. So it could be an inflection point where I'm much more familiar with doing this. But right now, if I tried to have a conversation with AI in a conference room, I wouldn't know how to ask for it. I don't have the right vernacular. I don't have the right terms. So I may not be ready to have a conversation. And identity. What does the impact of the new technology have on my personal identity? Well, this is certainly something that's been very powerful with the adoption of AI, because I can reduce my work time, right? I can get more done in less time, and the writing looks a lot better than I can write. It's much better organized. People can read it and understand it. So I like what I'm getting when I use my ChatGPT. If I'm using voice conversational ChatGPT, is my identity and job satisfaction affected? Maybe, maybe not. If we shut our eyes for a minute and we recognize that the voice and the skills and the intelligence increases almost at a peer level, then I may have a challenge with a job satisfaction identity, because the chat may be able to do better than I can do. It can be more performing and more capable. So I need to consider that. And then we talked about power and the ability to give more power to the individual. So if I'm able to get into information, work faster, and be more productive, as a lower employee, that may be more effective. But if I am the one who normally has all that information, I normally do those jobs, and you're a subordinate and you're able to do what I can do in less time, then I may find that to be a risk, and I may not be ready to adopt it. But let's work through this a little bit more. Voice conversation added to a video conferencing or collaboration space. or let's start with an office room, a huddle room, or a meeting room. I got to think about how I'm going to handle the audio, the video, the control, the computer, and the collaboration. These are all factors in how I design the spaces and incorporate AI, right? So not only that, but I'm using this AI conversation in the office and in the open space, and I'm going to be able to want to have that same capability in the huddle room, down the hall, in a multi-purpose room as well. So how I use and talk to AI is going to be not in just one scenario, but in multiple scenarios. So let's take the desk itself. How much time do we have? Are we at for time so far?
15 minutes.
15 minutes, okay. So at the desk, right? I'm working with my AI chat. What are some of the things I need to consider? First one, give you screen real estate, right? I need to have enough space to be able to have that chat session at the same time I have other material. Well, I've got a mouse, so I can always move and manipulate the screen real estate because I've got a mouse to do that. I don't have that in a meeting room, right? What else do I need? I need to have a microphone, right? So I can talk. And I need to have a nice clear dictation, right? So that it can hear and understand regardless of my voice. It needs to be able to do that. I need to be able to hear it, and I need to be able to engage in that conversation and have that chat in my room. So what happens when I take that into a huddle room? A couple things. This is, I'm not sure if you've seen this restaurant Mercury, right? But let's do a couple assumptions. We're going to bring our own intelligence, right? So I'm going to bring my laptop in. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to plug it in. I'm going to plug in a USB-C cable, right? So I'm going to go, okay, here's my laptop. Instead of sharing a PowerPoint session, I'm going to share my chat session, right? Text, fine. What happens when I want to send the audio? No problem, because I'm just doing it local to you. I'm able to share my content up on the screen, and I can hear the audio, right? So I'm good. If I'm peer-to-peer in this room, I should have no problem being able to share my chat session with you, right? Is that good? But if you wanted to share your chat session, you'd have to plug in your laptop. So we'd have to somehow share the same session. I'd probably have to type, or the voice, the speak. So there's a speaker in here with a talking box. That voice needs to somehow get back to my computer. So if I ask a question, this microphone back into the chat needs to work, right? There's a little icon right now in ChatGPT to push that icon. Somehow it needs to be open and shut without having to constantly push that button. So I have a conversation with my computer. Normally it's just presentation. I've got to have audio coming back in, right? Now what happens when we take that into a larger room? A couple of things. Most building spaces have a limitation. They've designed the perimeter to have the meeting rooms, to have all the view, and then they have a hallway and they have offices. Very, very common in all of the buildings. And so the limitation of the width of the room defines the limitation of the screen space I can have, because if I have a door swing or anything in the way, it's going to be a problem. I have a choice. I can either have one big screen or two smaller screens, right? Two smaller screens limit my view, my view down the table. I can see less information, but I know I need to act more information. So I have a problem, because I have to have more screen real estate than I have the ability to share. Most likely, I'm going to need my laptop to be able to have my session concurrent. I'm going to be sharing and joining the session, seeing myself on the screen and sharing my content with my laptop. Both are in the call at the same time, right? That's happening all the time. Everyone's bringing their laptop into the rooms. What else? Windows. If I'm sharing PowerPoint slides, one thing. If I'm sharing important data and making strategic information, I need to have this glass be treated. There's material that you can put on the glass that blocks out and blurs out content on the screen. I want that. I want to be able to protect data on the screen to only be people in the room, okay? And again, I have challenges around how I'm going to deal with the audio and be able to talk back. I need a DSP. I need to have multiple processes for where the audio comes in so it can get into my laptop to be able to share, as well as be able to be heard to the far side. How many of you have tried to play a videotape into a Zoom call or a Teams call and no audio is coming through, right? Because you have to select, you have to go to the advanced menu. There's a smile, you know what I'm talking about? You go to the advanced menu to select the audio coming out of my laptop. It's not an easy thing to do. Most people like leaning into their microphones or somehow trying to get the audio out. So audio out of a laptop is problematic When you're trying to share the content, we've got to break that and figure out how to do that. If I'm a company, and there are many companies that are knowledge firms, they want to share with their clients how smart they are leaders in their industry. And when they share this, they want to create an experience. This isn't a regular meeting room. This is a client-facing space, and I want to be able to engage with the client. And in the past, this has been a structured, slow, PowerPoints and multiple imagery, surround sound system to be able to do this, curated. But now this is much more dynamic because the content's going to change as I reach in and ask questions. The answers and what happens to the content's going to change each time. If I'm in a room like that, in a round room, how does it get operated? How does this room get supported? I've got resolution that's beyond what I would normally see on a screen. I've got to somehow be able to remotely support an individual sitting in front of people in a very important environment. And I've got to be able to do that somewhere co-located. And at the same time, I've got to think about how I'm going to deal with the bidirectional audio and how to be able to deal with the content presentation. So these meeting in these sort of next level client theaters are absolutely going to be critical as people invest in the AI capabilities in their company and want to share the smartness and compete with other companies on their intelligences and capabilities. What about in higher ed? What do you think is going to happen here? Well, first of all, the thing to keep in mind is when you're planning these higher ed spaces today and you're making an auditorium or a space, people don't know what's going to happen. They're building these rooms based upon the last way they built the rooms. The number one thing we know is we're going to need more screen real estate, right? We need as much screen real estate as we possibly can to be able to have this content. We need to think through who's the smartest person in the room. It's no longer the instructor. The instructor is becoming a facilitator, and they're reaching and grabbing information and sharing information, and the people that are in the room need to have the ability to interact with that content much more dynamically. They need to be able to talk or answer questions or interact fluidly so that the content that's coming through the screen can be iterative, change on the question, on a response, not the instructor pushing slide decks, right? They're learning in a whole new different method, a method that's never been done before. And the facilities need to be able to support them. And in most cases, the infrastructure needs to be predetermined where it hasn't been done before. And you probably have the bandwidth, you probably can do this, but you need to think through how it's going to be controlled, operated, and selected before it's actually implemented so you understand those requirements. Hospitality. Hospitality is a great area for voice control because if you look at ordering a meal at the hotel, multiple meals coming in, and people are hands busy all the time. They need a hands-free way to be able to tell other people what's going on. Your meal's going to be up there in 10 minutes, sir. I have a lot other cues and coming up. So hands-free capability is very important here. But there's other factors happening in hospitality. The conversations, whether with a client or with your peer, are happening in open areas. I need to ring fence this conversation. I need to have privacy control. So if I'm talking and having a conversation with the information coming out, I don't want it to be going out any further than the limitations. So I'm looking for technologies that will limit the amount of audio coming out and also have higher quality audio in a high ambient environment in order to make this conversations effective. So service industry is really important for voice capability, and the ability to support guest services is also very important. Healthcare. Healthcare is number one where this technology is taking place. It needs to be HIPAA compliant, which means it's most likely going to be on Azure, and Microsoft is leading this Azure environment, so most of these services are going to be running right along with Azure. But what's happening today is people are, how much time do I have? 5 minutes? Is that the images, when you go in for an X-ray or a scan, and it's a serious problem that you have, most of the time, those scans are going out to India or out to New Zealand overnight, someone's taking those scans, reviewing them, and by the time in the morning, when you wake up in the patient room, they have looked at the scan and they've identified a problem, okay, or a potential problem. And then the practitioner is then validating, yes, what they saw in India is actually there. We think this could be a problem. Now this is moving to real time, right? The scans are happening much more rapidly, right within the practitioner's time frame so they don't have to wait 24 hours to be able to get those results. Okay? So now that I have the results and I'm working through the ability to identify images, right? Because we can process images, identify problems. I need to be able to share what I find with my peers or with the patient. And we need to have a discussion. We need to have a choice of options. We need to be able to go further into the analysis. So this is certainly happening in healthcare today, and it's happening right now with Da Vinci. So Da Vinci is an AI service that's running in with surgery. It's guiding the surgeon to avoid making the wrong cuts in a body, right? But you can obviously see how conversational AI will be very important here to be able to engage with an intelligent service without having to touch anything, right? Very, very critical to be able to have this supported. And in command and control, we can take this to another level, which is support for multiple AI engagements happening simultaneously across the environment. Whether this is happening at lights, stoplights, or whether it's happening at power grids, or whether it's happening in your corporate office, multiple agents and services, intelligent services are happening, and I need to be able to figure out a way to identify all of them happening concurrently, which ones are acting properly, where's the health of the system, and how do I dynamically respond to that. Okay, so in summary, the workplace strategy is changing. The shape of my room is changing. The structure of the room where I put the cameras and what the displays are not all at the front end of the wall. I'm moving the hardware around to fit the hybrid environment so people can see and hear more effectively. And I'm treating the physical and virtual infrastructure as two important halves of the conversation. Architects need to recognize that the virtual information is just as important as the in-person experience. And they're seeing that, and they're recognizing, bringing technologists in early in the conversation to make sure, do we have all of the user experience understandings of the technology built into the physical space? Because the workspace is a measurement of organizational performance. And I want to make sure that workspace isn't just physical, but it's also virtual. And I want to be able to plan for these intelligent conversations because they're coming soon. So I'm going to leave that and ask you questions. Any thoughts and questions you'd like to share?
Yeah, the slide you had about requirements for the user area to interface with AI. You were asking what you think is needed, camera, microphone.
Yes.
So when the shift several years ago went to the open plan that you mentioned earlier, you know, one of the criticisms
This one?
was, well, how can I have private conversations on
Yes.
my phone? You know, things that I don't necessarily, that I don't need to share, and it doesn't, you know, pollute, in a noise way, pollute the rest of the working environment.
Right.
And so they said, okay, well, we'll have little huddle rooms, we'll have phone call booths, you know, we'll have all sorts of ways for you to go and have those private conversations.
Yes.
So if you're bringing back the need now to interact with an AI verbally,
Yes.
isn't that going to now create more noise pollution in the open work?
Yes, yes. And in the open work area and in the office, in the meeting rooms as well, absolutely. Acoustics are a critical part of that factor, right? Not only do they need to hear what's being said, but you also need to not be overheard as that conversation is taking place. And that ring fencing is very effective on the microphone side. So for the far end, they have technologies to create these boundaries or zones. So my audio is only heard if I step back too far, you can't hear me. So going out, that's fine. But being the audio coming into that space, there's yet to be. The same thing with my phone, right? If I'm having a conversation on my phone, right? People are hearing what I'm saying. There's no blocking of that, of my conversation. So I'm still looking for technologies that will create either garble the sound or somehow allow me to have a conversation without having it to be effectively overheard. Right now we've got sound masking, which is very important. So sound masking in those open areas is how you do that. You increase the overall ambient, and that way it's hard to hear the conversation. The voice is still happening, but you can't understand the tones and the actual words. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Do you think that conversational AI is going to happen? Because I'm not sure.
You know, one of the things you didn't really discuss was the nature of the work that's going on at the business that you're, you know, envisioning time and space for. Is it just normal operational work of a company and its accounting division, or?
Right, yeah. And I would.
Or is it a project-based company that's actually built around
Yes, right, and that's a great point. So the question was about what type of work does the organization, where does it make sense? I guess the point would be, you have some people that are creative people, that are content-based people. We talked about that split between creativity and productivity. This is in that creativity zone. The same way you have interactive whiteboards, not everyone's using interactive whiteboards. You have certain pieces of people within the organization that are designing products, that are innovating and creating content, marketing and development and engineering. Those are not all the way through the organization. So it's much more subject-oriented capabilities that you need to look for, as opposed to everybody doing it. Unless you're seeing a lot of people bringing in their iPhone saying, I got this, I can do this work at home much faster than I can do in the office. How do we make this happen more effectively? So until that happens, I would focus in zones and look at creativity capabilities and reinforce those groups and make them as effective as possible to balance out the productivity tools that we already have in place.
Yeah, I think one of the answers to the question, you actually gave one of the answers to your question earlier, which is, I think it's a lot of it's going to come down to the executive level or the leadership level's ability to adopt it. Right? The more that they embrace and adopt it, the faster you're going to see that roll out within an organization. And one of the thoughts that I had, and I think it's maybe a bigger conversation to kind of be had, is in our market, a lot of it's going to be based on adoption and cost. It's like it's going to fall within those two worlds. We like the technology, we see the technology, how can we be able to roll it out within our organization? What does that cost implication look like? And then from a budgeting perspective, and how quickly can they adopt it or not adopt it?
Yeah, and I see the cost very low because we're talking USB audio capabilities, almost everything's there. We don't need a bigger pipe. We may need more screen real estate regardless. We're always going to need more screen real estate, so we're limited by that anyways. So I think the cost of upgrading the rooms to support it is there. The question is it providing value? And I would say, as soon as you see these boxes able to reason, capably come back and be effective, we're only using it now. You're only seeing a very small, they're only releasing the smallest capabilities because it's a risk, right? It can go nuts, right? So you're putting in your PowerPoint or your Word document, you're getting wordsmith. You're not recognizing, and you'll see this soon, problem solving, project management, strategy is really what these bots are capable of doing. So an executive that's seeing this and saying, well, okay, wait a minute, this isn't just a PowerPoint thing. I can get a rollout estimate and strategy of how I'm going to deploy this next version of a product, and I can see that. And then the next thing would be, how do I share what I just saw with my partner? How do I share this information? That's what I'm trying to get back on this message, is that we see work too many times by these companies being heads down in my desk, and I'm saying, wait a minute, how do we share this experience to other people? What are the tricks and modalities and capabilities of doing this so that I'm ready to be able to design spaces that can be an easy forklift to be able to provide that? And then you're jumping ahead of your competition who hasn't thought and recognized this, and you're saying, no, we just need USB, DSP, I need a push-to-talk microphone, and I'm almost there. I'm almost able to give you what you can only do at your desk, I can give to you in a room. And I can make you 50% or 20% more productive than you would have been able to be otherwise. Thank you very much.